To the MPC meeting for Thursday, August 1st, first day of August. Summer's almost over. That means the blackberries are going to start turning, so get your pick in now. Would like to welcome all those in attendance, and Paul's already started the recording, so we're good there. I would like to call this meeting officially to order. If there's any adjustments to the agenda, Paul, is there any adjustments that you have?
Chair, I don't have any adjustments this morning. I just want to make sure that everybody saw my email with the revised agenda and the new item that was added.
Yep.
Everybody's got a thumbs up on that? Yeah, I got that. Thanks for sending that out, Paul. Is there any members that have any announcements for the committee at this time? Nobody's having any new grandkids, nothing like that? Okay, good deal. Let's move on then. This is the time for us to have some comments from the audience. If we do have any people online, Paul, do we have anybody online for that?
We do. Mr. Zako has indicated that he would like to speak, so I am opening that up for him here in just a moment.
All right. Rob's an old hat at that, so he knows how that works. So if there's anyone else online that's listening that joins afterwards and wants to make a comment, they can certainly raise their virtual hand and be called upon by Paul. But without further ado, let's go to Mr. Zako. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Chair Level, members of MPC and staff. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you this morning. I am Rob Zako, Executive Director of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. For the record, just a couple brief comments. First, we see you're looking to adopt the public participation plan later this morning, and that is good. I just want to sort of highlight from our comments on that when the public has a chance to comment in advance of a decision, and if that's helpful to you, that's good. But in some ways, MPC or the Central Lane MPO serves more as a clearinghouse for information of taking in federal money and allocating different jurisdictions and spending that, and just keeping the public informed of how that money is being spent and what it's doing is really important. And so just want to underscore that informing the public is actually an important part of public participation, and we're happy to see that that's being emphasized in the plan. So thank you so much to you and to staff for that direction. The other thing I want to say, and I'll come back next month and say some more, but the last day in September and the first week in October is the National Week Without Driving. And the National Challenge asks all of us to go without driving for a week. And Bess found that to be quite a heavy ask. We're not going to be doing that this coming year. What we are going to do is we're going to work with your staff and see if it's possible for each of you to just one time during that week do something that's not driving. It could be if you're with Lane Transit District, riding on the bus. If you're with, say, Springfield or Eugene, maybe taking a look at your bike projects, similar with Lane County. Really just an opportunity for you to highlight already the good work that you're doing related to not driving. So that's September 30th through October 6th, and I will share more about that with you next month. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you for your comment, Rob. Is there anyone else online, Paul, that we should make mention of?
Chair, at this point, I don't see anybody else indicating that or anybody other than staff and members present.
Okay, awesome. Let's move on from that then. We come to the point of the agenda where we're looking at our June 6th MPC meeting minutes. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look those over. And if those all look good, I'm looking for a motion to approve and adopt those. And that would be a mute. Councilor Groves.
Move to adopt the minutes as indicated in the packet.
Do I have a second? I think somebody's got to take their mute button off, and then we'll have a second here.
Okay.
There you go.
You got me, Grove. Mr. Grove. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Been moved and seconded that our minutes will be approved. All those in favor indicate with a thumbs up or an aye. Motion passes. Good deal. All right, moving right along. Let's go to what Mr. Zako had alluded to in his comments is our public participation plan, the Triple P adoption. This is a federal regulation that stipulates that MPOs shall develop and use a documented participation plan that defines a process for providing interested parties with reasonable opportunities to be involved in the metropolitan transportation planning process. So we'd like to our action today is to approve this. This is resolution 2024-03, but we also have some presentation minutes from Daniel. So Daniel, if you're ready, take it away, sir.
Yeah. Daniel Hollister, Senior Planner at Metropolitan. As you said, this is like a revised draft of the 2024 Public Participation Plan for Central Metropolitan Planning Organization. So this was presented to MPC in April. We had a public hearing. Since then, a 45-day public review and comment period has been completed.
Hey, Daniel, apologize for interrupting, sir, but is there a possibility you could move your microphone closer to you on your computer? It sounds a little like you're from Pluto.
Try to speak up a little bit.
There you go. Get those lungs inflated. Good job.
Yeah. But I had said a 45-day public review and comment period was completed for this now. There were comments received, and those are included in your meeting materials for today. Comments have been reviewed and considered. A number of changes to the review draft were made as a result of those comments. On page 45 of the plan, there's a section that's titled Summary Comments and Other Influence of this Plan. That's been revised to document those changes that were resulted from the comments we received. I'm going to go over those just briefly here. The addition of an evaluation measure in chapter 4 for a number of comments that resulted in changes to what we have done in the that's in page 31. On page 4, recognition that among the regular interested parties, there are parties that are maybe more genuinely interested than others, and the NPO should particularly and explicitly consult with those parties to understand what their interests are and how they want to participate with the NPO. On page 20, there's clarification of the role that the ETIP, the Electronic Transportation Improvement Program, which is currently in development, the role that that will have in providing ongoing real-time information to the public about planned and NPO projects and the spending of public funds. So that, as Mr. Zako mentioned, our role in providing that kind of information, especially current information, we took that seriously, and this is an investment that NBC has supported this ETIP. I'll have more updates on the ETIP also on throughout the document, but particularly on pages 47, 50, there's clarification about this an informational brochure or digital resource that we're currently updating. It explains in clear terms how transportation planning and implementation is done in the NPO area, including the roles of the NPO, its partners, how the public can get involved, when public input can be most effective. That's currently called the 2007 publication called the Citizens Guide. That's a process of updating the source. There was also inclusion of those comments that we received. Page 6. Some other changes to that draft plan that were unrelated to the comments we received include on page 10, the definition/intent of Objective 2 states that staff will respond to all public comments. This is now going to be clarified to say staff will acknowledge all public comments and respond as necessary. Updates to the description of the plan adoption timeline on page 4. There's also selling and appreciation plan and corrections. I do also want to remind this group that this public participation plan also explicitly addresses 2 corrective actions from a 2023 federal review of our 2015 public participation plan. Those corrective actions were 1, to revise procedures to more accurately document current public involvement procedures that will be used as part of the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan, as well as other public processes. That is addressed in this plan in pages 17 through 20. 2, to include procedures in the public participation plan for involving and consulting with federal land management agencies that manage land within the metropolitan planning area in the development of the regional transportation plan and the transportation improvement program. That is also addressed on page 19. There is This plan also addresses a recommendation from that federal review to expand our documentation of the process to coordinate with tribal governments. That is also included. So the Transportation Planning Committee reviewed this revised draft at their July 18 meeting and formally recommended EPC adopt this public participation plan. So the action requested today is for EPC to approve resolution 2024-03 adopting the public participation plan is set forth in the report.
Okay, good job, Dan. Thank you. Is there any questions from any of the members on what Dan's covered for this public participation plan? Mr. Councilor Randy Groves.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't a question about what you reported on, but the Eugene delegation, well, the mayor and myself and our staff had a discussion earlier this week about public participation. And so few people that I run into even know MPC exists or what it is. And part of increasing public participation is, making people aware of what we're doing. And one of the suggestions that kind of popped out of our discussion is if, we all belong to different boards and commissions. I know in Eugene, each counselor goes to neighborhood association meetings, and we're usually asked to update what's going on in the city. And, if we just had a simple bulleted kind of the top 3 or 4 things that are going on with MPC, it might help raise awareness so that we have more in our community besides Rob Zako that know we exist. And I certainly appreciate Rob's participation, but I would like to see more people being involved. And so I don't know how the other members of this group feel about that, but the nice thing about having kind of a consistent list is we're all saying the same thing basically, rather than each one taking what they consider the high points. Now, if there's something specific to the area you're speaking with, of course you can emphasize something that's not on the list, but just as a way of trying to raise awareness. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you. Anyone else? All right, this is an action item, so I'm looking for a motion to approve resolution 2024-03.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Okay, Steve's on the second. Councilor Mo's the second. So it's been moved and seconded to approve resolution 2024-03 to adopt our public participation plan. All those in favor signify with a thumbs up or an eye. Motion passes. Any opposed? Nope, nobody opposed. All right, good. Motion passes. Thank you very much. All right, let's move along. Thanks, Dan, for the presentation. Appreciate it very much. Dan, just as we kind of exit out of that one, I did want to tell you, I did notice a couple of quotes in the survey I thought were very good. Dial back the bureaucratic nonsense was one of my favorites. And the fact that we don't have a media anymore. So we need to figure out, like Councilor Grove says, ways of getting our message out there to the folks. So good deal. Thanks for doing that. A lot of work. All right, we got this new agenda item in front of us. That is a request for letters of support for some EV infrastructure requests that we're going to make to the federal government. We've got 2 people that are going to make some presentations for us, Eileen Cunningham from ODOT and Sasha from Lane County. And so I'd like to turn it over to Eileen first to make her presentation on the ODOT's request and the letter of support they want from MPC. So go ahead if you're ready.
Great. Thank you for having me. So I'm Eileen Cunningham. I'm with ODOT. I work in the statewide planning unit. I am helping out with the climate office on this initiative, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we're asking for a letter of support for our application. So let me try to get that done. Okay. Hopefully you're seeing my screen. And can you see my screen?
Not yet,
Yep,
Eileen.
not yet.
No. Okay. Let me see if I can exit out of this. Okay, bear with me. And I can also just read from my
Eileen, if you're new to the MPC, typically when there's a gap like this, you're required to fill it in with music. So whenever you want to start humming would be good.
I'm gonna figure this out really quickly. Okay,
Okay,
can you
sounds
see
good.
my screen
There you go.
now?
Looks good
Okay,
now.
and can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Are you okay? So I'm gonna start the presentation. Just let me know if you see the first slide. Hopefully that, okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, so I'll be going, so this is in regards to the charging and fueling infrastructure grant program, and it's the tri-state application. So I'll go over what that entails. So this tri-state application includes, and just let me, sorry, figuring this out. Okay, so the Charging and Infrastructure Discretionary Grant Program, or CFI program for short, is a federal funding program under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which supports publicly accessible EV charging or hydrogen fueling infrastructure. The CFI program has two pathways within the overall funding program, and those are the corridor program and the community program. The corridor program, which is the one that we're moving forward with, supports infrastructure along federally designated alternative fueling corridors, and the community program is focused on filling gaps in the clean infrastructure access and prioritizes rural and low-income areas. Basically what's being, this allows for a total of 2.5 billion over 5 years that's available to, in a competitive way for local jurisdictions and other agencies and entities to apply for grant funding for their projects. And so this is, so we did apply in round one. So we're now into round two, and that's what we're asking for a lot of support for. But just for background, we did apply for round one, and it was for charging and infrastructure fueling along, so California, Oregon, and Washington along I-5. And that request was not successful. We are resubmitting. There was an opportunity to resubmit. And just so you know that that is underway as well. In terms of round two, we have asked for, so this is a look at, here, let me actually switch to this. So for round two, our projects will focus on projects along Interstate 5 within the segments highlighted in blue. And this will focus on medium and heavy duty charging infrastructure, and it aligns with the national zero emission fueling corridor strategy. And these EV charging stations are focused on providing 2 sites within Washington, 2 within Oregon, and 3 within California. The Oregon segment in particular, the Oregon segments in particular stretch from the Washington border to Woodburn, and then the second segment stretches from Albany to Eugene area, and specifically at the intersection of I-5 and 126. And just looking at, okay, so in terms of the total project funding request, it's 49 million. The split is 14 million each for Washington and Oregon, and then 21 million for California. And we did release a request for information to get some more feedback on what folks were looking for, and desired amenities, those kinds of things, potential locations, and did get some really good information. And so, in terms of the infrastructure that folks were looking to have there, and so in summary, here's kind of a look at all of our partners. So ourselves, ODOT, WashDOT, California Energy Commission, and then Caltrans is participating in this application. And we are requesting your support, a letter of support of this application. And hopefully I have stopped sharing.
All right.
Okay,
Sounds good.
thank you.
Let's thank you, Eileen. Appreciate that. Councilor Mo, if you wouldn't mind, let's let Sasha present. And if you want to hold that thought question, we can answer those questions in kind of a round robin. Would that be all right? All right. Make sure you unmute your microphone, Steve. We want to hear that lovely voice of yours. Nope, still can't hear you. There you go. Is that good? All right, good deal. All right, well then, Sasha, you're up for Lane County's request. So whenever you're ready, you go right ahead.
Well, thank you. It's going to be a slightly lower tech version. Admittedly, I am not leading this grant application, but I am here supporting our policy division in requesting a letter of support from MPC. Thank you for your time today. So like ODOT, Lane County is also submitting for the second time a charging and fueling infrastructure grant request. We were not successful with the first round. The difference between us is we're going for the community program for deploying EV charging and alternative fueling infrastructure in public areas. And what Eileen just presented is the corridor program. Lane County's focus, and in partnership with City of Eugene, is to look at areas in the Eugene-Springfield area, as well as opportunities that align with public spaces, including at Lane County parks along Highway 126 and 58. I will note both of those highways are not yet part of the designated alternative fuel corridors. And so I-5 is, and we hope in later phases, those highways 58 and 126 will also be designated with that, the alternative fuel corridor, so that they are eligible at a later date for the corridor program. We are targeting the phase one round one application. Our cost was roughly almost $19 million, and the federal share, the maximum federal share is $15 million. We assume the cost will be similar this round. We're making some small modifications, so we don't have all of our locations dialed in at this time. We're doing some fine tuning to make it as competitive of an application as possible. I am happy to answer any additional questions. Again, I don't know all of the nuances of this application, so I may have to follow up if you have very specific questions.
Good deal. Thank you, Sasha. Let's go back to Councilor Mo. You had a hand up there after Eileen made her presentation. Go ahead, sir.
You got to turn my microphone on.
Hey, you're sounding good now. Well, yeah, now you got it off. Turn it back on, Steve. Nope, still off. There you go.
Okay,
That's it. Got it.
the electrification of the corridors, that's our future. But I'm on OMPOC, and we talked about this extensively a couple of months ago, and that's the heavy freight. There is no technology, no battery available for trucks to go distances, because you get a truck driver on a truck, he's going to drive 200-300 miles. He's not going to stop to recharge. He wants to zoom through, which is what they do. So that's going to be part that's going to be delayed. And we suggested, let's go ahead, let's get everybody else on there. It'll come along eventually. The technology will be there, and we'll get the trucks out there. But in the meantime, we have to consider that we're going to get our step. We need to let them go. That's all.
Thank you. Any other questions for either Eileen or Sasha? I have one just as a clarification, because I'm not quite clear. If we approve both of these, if the board allows me to approve both of these are different funding buckets, or are they coming out of the same funding bucket? You said one was corridor and one was community. Those are separate. They're not going to intermix. Okay, good.
Correct.
Awesome. Got to get head nods. All right, good deal. So this is an action item, folks. If we have no other questions, is the board wanting to make a motion that allows the chair to sign these letters of recommendations and pen those accordingly to these asks? Do I have a motion?
I'm happy to move that the board authorize you to sign these letters.
Great, thank you, Mayor Bennis. Do you have a second?
Second.
Councilor Mosway, and
Oh.
Councilor Groves has got a second.
That's
Okay, so I
okay.
have a motion and a second to sign authorization for the board chair of MPC to sign both of these letters of support for these infrastructure programs, both the community and the corridor. All those in favor signify with an aye or a thumbs up.
Aye.
Aye, good deal. It passes. Any opposed? That's probably everybody. It passes. All right, well, thank you very much. Sasha and Eileen, thanks for the information.
Thank you.
Wish you well on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, good deal. Awesome.
We appreciate it.
All right, our next up in presentation is item 6B, which is our climate-friendly, equitable communities draft performance measures. And so there is a fairly robust packet of that in your packet. I hope you read through that. And that's going to be presented to us for our educational benefit for Kelly. Is she on and ready to go, Kelly? How are you?
I am on, thank you.
Good deal, you go ahead.
Chair. Yeah, and I actually wanted to introduce Ryan Farncombe and Matt Fleden with Parametrics, and I believe Brian Hurley will also be joining from ODOT. As a reminder, Parametrics has a contract with ODOT and has been working with us to meet the new climate-friendly equitable communities requirements, particularly in establishing performance measures and targets for the actions in our region's Central Lane Scenario Plan, which was approved by MPC in 2015. Ryan's going to go over these requirements and then present the proposed performance measures for your feedback and direction. And with that, I will hand it over to Ryan.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. Let me pull up the presentation here. 1 second. Oh, I think, Kelly, do I need permission to share the presentation?
Paul.
Yes, I'm sorry, just a minute. I have to track down your name in the long list of people, and then there we go. You should have that ability now.
No luck so far. Oh, wait, there we go. Okay, I have the power.
Okay.
Thanks, sorry about that. Okay, can you guys see the presentation?
We can.
Okay, great.
We see the slides. You might want to put it in present mode.
Oh, it is, but I think it's presenting the wrong screen. Sorry, just this.
It's a really nice spreadsheet.
God bless those people that can decipher those things.
There you
Okay.
go.
Do the happy dance now, Ryan. Good job.
Okay, great. Sorry, you'd think this is my first time on Zoom. It's not, I swear. Okay, but thanks everyone for your time today. I think we have about half an hour for this. What we would like to do is, it's been a couple months now that we last talked to you about this project. And so we just wanted to quickly remind you about what we're up to in terms of the big picture. And then dive into our draft recommendations around performance measures related to the scenario planning effort. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. And so today, I think our main ask of this group is for your thoughts and feedback about where we're headed with the draft performance measures. None of this is set in stone. We're still working out a lot of things, but we thought this was a good time to update you on where we're at. Okay, so as a big picture reminder, we are working with jurisdictions and LCOG and ODOT to update the central lane scenario plan. What we're doing is really charting a path towards reaching the greenhouse gas reduction target that has been set in state rules. And you can see the target there, 30% below 2005 rules by 2050. The outcomes of the process that we're in. So first of all, we're going to refresh that 2015 preferred scenario where we're going to update it to make sure that the strategies and recommendations in there reflect current plans and support implementation. We're also, as I mentioned, in the midst of developing performance measures and targets to track progress towards those emissions reductions targets. We're also going to develop a report that captures those actions and a reporting schedule. And then at the end of all of this work, the intent is for the performance measures to be adopted and into relevant transportation system plans, comp plans. And I'm going through this relatively fast, so please interrupt me if you have any questions, because this is kind of repeat from the last time we talked with you. In terms of reporting on these performance measures, there are a couple of obligations for the jurisdictions. First, there's a major report that is due to DLCD during the years that the region adopts a regional transportation plan. So we are the work we're doing now will feed into a major report that is potentially off. It's likely going to be off cycle with the RTP update, and that's okay. But the general gist is that when the RTP is updated, a major report is also submitted, and that major report is going to include where jurisdictions in the region are at on performance measures today, as well as what those targets are and what actions will be taken to move towards the target. And then every year, a minor report is due to just essentially a minor update on progress. And it truly is minor. I don't know if Brian's on yet, but I think he can share that ODOT and DLCD have developed a really short form to serve as the minor report. So quickly on schedule, in essence, we're trying to wrap up our work by the end of the year, which is already rapidly approaching. But we do anticipate coming back to this group a couple of more times before the end of the year. We'd like to come back potentially in September, more likely October, to review revised performance measures and also talk more about targets that we're setting and talk about the refresh overall to the central lane scenario plan. And then another meeting to review a revised implementation chapter to that scenario plan late in the year, and final review of those performance measures and targets. So we're coordinating closely with LCOG. We also have a project management team, many of whom I know are on the call today. And it's been great working with them on this project. I think we've had 3 meetings so far, and we have a 4th coming up. And then obviously engaging with the MPC at key points to get your thoughts and confirm where we're headed. And ultimately, the MPC is responsible for approving the performance measures and targets, the updated implementation chapter, and the term in the statute is corrective actions to ensure targets are being met. And then, of course, we're working closely with ODOT and DLCD too to provide ongoing support. I'll pause there just for a second, just to see if there's any questions about kind of the big picture of what we're up to.
Doesn't appear, Ryan. Go ahead.
Thanks. I will keep marching on. Performance measures. So this is a big piece of the new work we're doing. And again, we're developing these performance measures to help us track progress towards things we know that help us reach that 30% greenhouse gas reduction target. A couple of key things to note here are that there are no specific performance measures required. by the rules. Some of your fellow regions in the state that aren't doing a scenario planning process do have required measures that are spelled out in the rules, but that is not the case for us. So that is why we are going through this process to develop them. Ideally, our performance measures are closely aligned with preferred scenario strategies. That doesn't necessarily mean that every preferred scenario strategy needs its own performance measure. And we'll get into this in a second, but it's the case that one performance measure in many cases covers many aspects of the preferred of the scenario plan. And we ultimately do have that flexibility to choose those performance measures that make the most sense for us, and importantly, are actual things we can track and data that's not too hard to collect, right? Which ensures that this doesn't become a something that can't be operated on after we've left the project here. Before I get into the draft measures, a quick reminder about the strategies in the Central Scenario Plan. I won't read these all off to you verbatim, but there are several investment areas. Here we've got transit, parking management, education, and marketing. Move this up for one more second. And then here's the other categories: active transportation, fleet and fuels, pricing, and roads. I think it's important to note here on that point I made earlier that not every strategy needs a performance measure. First of all, there's that would be a lot of performance measures. Second of all, there are some of these actually, we're really trying to focus the measures on those things that are within the jurisdiction or region's control, right? So for example, on pricing, supporting transition to a road usage charge fee, which is a strategy in the scenario plan, is a worthwhile effort, but it's not necessarily the actual implementation of the road usage charge fee is not really in the jurisdictions or the region's control per se. So you'll see that we don't actually have any performance measures related to these pricing strategies. So briefly, what does a good performance measure look like? And we talked about this with you all a little bit last time. I think I've heard some of the feedback I've heard, but specifically that we want the performance measures to be something that does not become an onerous lift for anybody to track and into the future, which makes a lot of sense. So we want them to be actually measurable and quantifiable. And like I said, we want these to leverage readily available data to the maximum extent possible. We also want it to be as relevant as we can to the outcome that we're looking for from the Central Lane Scenario Plan. And we also want these measures to be as intuitive as we can so that people can understand what we're measuring and why. There's already a good pool of performance measures that are being tracked for various purposes and reasons in the region. For example, here are the performance measures for the RTP. And so when we developed our performance measures, we were trying our best to align with things that we're already looking out for in the region. Okay, so this is where we're at with our draft performance measures. And I will, so what we have here on the left is the actual performance measure. On the right is the CLSP, Central Land Scenario Planning category that the measure helps to address and track progress towards. And again, these measures, we will be setting targets for these measures in the next step of the project to help us move towards that 30% reduction in 2050 in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. I'll walk through these, and then I'd really like to turn it over to this group for a couple of questions I have on the next slide. So first, active transportation network completeness. This is looking at what share of collector and arterial streets have active transportation facilities either on that street or on a very close parallel route. Shared micromobility trips taken is around tracking the number of trips taken on shared micromobility, like bike share, for example. Access to jobs and services through active transportation is looking at the share of trips made using our regional travel model. The share of trips made share of short trips made by active transportation to jobs and services versus that share of trips that is not. The idea being that we're trying to push towards those short trips being on biking, walking, or rolling. Mode share is something I believe the region's already tracking, just the share of each mode in terms of travel. Vehicle miles traveled per capita as well. Level of transit service looks at the hours, the revenue hours of service per capita. One thing I want to note here too is that while the jurisdictions are required to report on measures, some of these measures are inherently regional in nature. And I think that level of transit service measure is a good example of that. Access to high capacity transit looks at the share of households or individuals that are within a certain distance of high capacity transit. Transit stops intersecting with bike and pedestrian facilities looks at essentially, are there good bike ped facilities that intersect with transit stops, as in, is it easy to walk and bike to transit? Publicly owned paid parking looks at the relative share of paid parking versus unpaid in kind of key downtown areas. And then employer and employee group pass program participation is kind of hitting on that education and marketing aspect of the Central Lane Scenario Plan to understand how programs are reaching people. The last thing I'll say here, and then I will pause because I've done a lot of talking here, I apologize, is that another thing we're required to do under the rules is to develop equity measures to ensure that outcomes are occurring equitably. And so the way we've been thinking about this is that for these measures, there will be an equity lens, for lack of a better word, to them. For example, active transportation network completeness, not just broadly in the entire region or jurisdiction, but also specifically within areas we've identified as being traditionally underserved. So I am going to pause there, and I would appreciate any comments or questions or other feedback from folks. Specifically, your overall reactions to these, again, keeping in mind those things I mentioned around what makes a good performance measure, and also other aspects of performance when you think back to that Central Lane Scenario Plan that are missing.
All right, no, everybody jump in at once. Ryan's got bated breath here for some questions. Anyone got any questions or comments? I'm not seeing any hands, Ryan. I might have just a quick question. It might just be my naiveness when I was looking at your performance measures is how do we access the information of vehicle miles traveled in a family? Is that a voluntary thing, or is that one of those technology things you got to plug into your car kind of things?
Oh, the VMT per capita, likely that'll be a modeled VMT per capita, as in when the regional travel model is updated, frequently. And so we would likely use the travel model to help estimate what the VMT per capita is.
So is that something then, if you estimated per capita, let's just say for argument's sake, 100 miles a week for every average person in Lane County, that would then be used for comparison in subsequent years to see if we're doing less of that to make sure that our goals of 1% down are going?
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, good. Thank you for clarifying that. Anyone else? All right, Ryan, continue on, sir.
Okay. So we're going to keep fleshing out these measures a little bit further, and specifically the methodology, again, to make sure that we're establishing a replicable process that's not going to be too onerous for anybody to repeat in the future. The other piece of this, and this is what we'll come back to talk to you more about this fall, is targets. And so we do need a target for these measures. And the key piece being that the targets must be reasonably likely to achieve the greenhouse gas reduction. And there's going to be a number of things we use to help set those targets. I think one of the main tools we're going to use is, may recall during the first presentation on this that we're updating a tool called Vision Eval, which is a scenario planning model that will help us set targets for some of these measures. For example, Vision Eval has a scenario for 2050 that makes an assumption about the amount of transit service provided per capita that gets us to that 30% reduction. So that can help us understand, well, what do we need to reach in terms of revenue hours of service per capita to actually reach our goals over the next 25 years. We'll also set targets for those equity performance measures I mentioned. And we're first going to work closely with the jurisdictional PMT to work through the target setting process and then come back to you with a proposal. In terms of next steps, I just kind of covered this. We'll work on those targets. We're also going to start taking a look at the implementation chapter for the scenario plan. I think October is when we're planning to be back with you and talk more about targets and introduce that implementation chapter. And our goal is we're still driving towards concluding this process at the end of this calendar year. So with that, I guess any other questions or comments?
Looks like Mayor Van Gordon's got his hand up. You go.
Interesting information. I'm looking forward to seeing it again in October. I think my just initial reaction is this thing's super complicated, right? And, you know, if we can, I think the question I'm going to have in October is there a simpler way to measure all of this stuff that is going to get us to whatever the target is, right? So that we're not, the more complexity we add to our performance measures, the harder it is to see the horizon. And then I think the other question from a scenario perspective is that simply like the markets change naturally, right? So what happens like, what's that base case look like, right? So that we can kind of get a sense of, hey, how much is this sort of organic change in the scenario versus how much are our policy levers that we're pulling actually doing things? And I think my broader concern is that when we make policy choices, even if it's 10, 15, 20 years down the road, is that we're making policy choices that actually have an impact. And if this gets too overly cumbersome, we'll lose the narrative.
Thanks for both those points. And on the first point very well taken about avoiding making this too complex. I think we'll be looking for your guidance again in October to make sure that we aren't presenting something that is overly complex or unwieldy. On your second point there, I think one thing that will help is, and I didn't mention this, is that we're also going to come back in October with information about, for these draft measures, about where we're at as a region and how we've progressed since 2005 as well, so that we can see how things have changed and where we're starting from and ostensibly where we need to go to meet that target. And the last thing I'll mention is just that the implementation chapter is intended to get to that specific policy level, like what are the things we're doing to move the needle on these things that we know are effective.
You know, going back to something Councilor Grove said early in the meeting, Ryan, I don't know if you heard, but just about how to get the MPC message out to the various people that we interact with as elected officials and appointed officials. And I'm just wondering if for October, if we could just have like maybe one of those really simplified 6-point bullet point sheets of, hey, when you interact with someone and tell them about the climate friendly action plan and the goals that we're doing, this is what we're focusing on, to really simplify it down to Mayor Van Gordon's point. Maybe that would be good to have a little cheat sheet by October if you could put one of those together.
Absolutely, almost like an elevator speech for what we're doing.
There you go. Yeah, like if we were running for your job and we were campaigning or something. Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, the second question I have, I don't know if anybody else got any questions, but let me just think, you know, we don't get a participation trophy for this. So if we don't meet our goals, what happens?
I'm a prefer partly to Brian on this, but I think in short, there's not necessarily there's nothing punitive per se if goals aren't met, right? So, Brian, what else would you add there?
Thank you, Ryan. Hello, everyone. Brian Hurley, ODOT Climate Office. ODOT is helping fund this process, but we are not the state agency who is responsible for regulating this process. But I do agree with Ryan's interpretation of the administrative rules. There's no negative repercussions for not meeting any of these targets. The jurisdictions are required to report on this to DLCD in what is called a major report that is due the year following when your RTP is updated or when your TSP is updated. And part of that reporting is getting to that policy level discussion that Ryan mentioned of how the jurisdiction is on track or not on track, and how the jurisdiction hopes to change in the future to get back on track towards that target or continue on that path, I should also say.
Yeah, good. Thanks for that information.
Excellent. Thank you.
Anyone else have any other comments or questions for Ryan or the team? Oh, we got a few more. Yes, Mr. Paul, go ahead.
Actually, please let the mayor go first.
Oh, didn't the pop up. Mayor Venus, go ahead, please.
Yeah, just to follow up on that question, and it may be that I just wasn't tracking everything that Ryan just shared, but we do have regular updates on the RTP, and it seems like it would be appropriate as we're having those updates to actually align where we are on these performance measures, since there's a lot of alignment with what we're being asked to do. So just thinking about future agendas and how those sort of come together in an agenda, continuing to keep us sort of apprised of both of those things.
Yes, good,
Yeah.
good, thank you.
Mayor Venice, I can say with the Regional Transportation Plan Update project that's happening now, we will be providing updates of the RTP's performance measures, and to the to where it makes sense, we can show alignment with that central lane scenario plan just to show that overlap and connection. And there is a lot of talk about performance measures right now, so we're really working hard to be efficient with that and appreciate the team's responsiveness to our ask for that. And so thank you for the question.
Mr. Paul, hands up, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, a couple of comments that follow up nicely what Mayor Venus just said, as well as others have said about trying to get the message out and have it be simpler. It is my fault. I slipped up a little bit on the agenda in that I put this under MPO issues. I want to remind MPC that this is not a federal MPO topic. This is actually a state requirement, and your jurisdictions agreed to have MPC be the governance structure for this. MPC in its role as a local body, not as the federal MPO. So I'll make sure I catch that on future agendas and separate it out from the MPO issues. But that's important because, as has been noted a couple times, it's the jurisdictions that have to report. It's not LCOG, it's not the MPO that has to do the reporting. It's the jurisdictions that are reporting on the performance measures. And it's possible, I'm not suggesting this, I'm just throwing it out for you to consider, those of you who represent those jurisdictions, that maybe come October or the fall, you might want a presentation at your local council or board, a high-level presentation on where this is and where it's going to be ending up at the end of the calendar year. Because it really is your response to the state requirements, not the MPOs or LCOGs. And then my last comment, and Brian, please correct me, I agree, there are no repercussions or penalties, but I do recall during the rulemaking advisory committee that went, the several years of rulemaking that went into this, that there was at least some casual mention that that could happen in the future, depending on how well the state does towards its climate goals. Nobody has said, yes, we're coming with penalties later on, but it's not been ruled out.
Well, that's an excellent point, Paul. I cannot speak to DLCD and how they will regulate jurisdiction progress towards the greenhouse gas reduction targets. I should rephrase what I said. There's no, under the administrative rules, there's no negative repercussions. But what does happen with the major reports is they are submitted to LCDC for approval, and part of that approval is a public hearing. So there's a process for stakeholders to potentially take issue with the actions that the jurisdictions are doing. So that could be viewed as a negative repercussion of not meeting the target. If you are not meeting your target, DLCD, I think, as well as some of your stakeholders, will be looking for a good explanation as to why you're not meeting your target and how you're going to get back on track. So that is an excellent point, Paul. That's a good consideration.
Mayor Van Gordon, your hand's up, sir.
Paul, I think casual discussion of penalties that come later describes every city and county's relationship with the state. And Brian, I'm not, and maybe we can go back and check that. That's not my understanding of the rules. The administrative rules is that there may be other planning, sort of issues that, that come down on the DLCD side. But I thought there were some things that they could do to kind of not do more than just exert political pressure on you. And, and then I think the third comment is, I think, Paul, you bring up a good point, right? When we get our arms around this is the most complicated thing that's happened in transportation and land use planning in a long time. Coming back and talking to your individual jurisdictions about it would, I think, help boards and councils.
Thank you, Mayor. We can work with Kelly to get a definitive answer from DLCD staff and then provide that to MPC.
It has been a long, 2 years since we've all been tracking this. So it could have been in one revision, 3 revisions ago. So I'm not if you come back and tell me I'm wrong, that wouldn't surprise me either.
I think you're both probably right. But as I am with ODOT, I cannot speak for DLCD, of course.
Fair enough. Anyone else got any comments before we move along on our agenda? I'm seeing none. All right, group, thank you very much for doing that. Ryan, Kelly, Brian, thanks everyone for doing that. Appreciate that very much.
Thank you for your time.
We don't have any action requested on that item, so we're going to move on to item 6C on our agenda, which is a report back. And really, it's kind of a discussion amongst those of us that were at the Joint Committee on Transportation at that July 17th Eugene Roundtable at the fairgrounds. I must say, now I know what it's like to live inside of a greenhouse. It was really hot in there. I don't know anybody else, but anyway, I thought we had some good topics of discussion. There were some interesting things on there. So this is really a good time for all of us who were there just to kind of share some of our takeaways from that. So I really don't feel the need to call on folks. If you just want to kind of jump in and just let me know what you thought of it, just feel free to just go ahead and jump in and we'll chat about it for a few minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna just jump in because I think that we had a lot of apprehension about whether this would be worthwhile, whether there would be enough time for us to have sort of meaningful conversation, and whether we'd be well heard. And I really appreciated the format and the tone of this meeting. I think that it felt like a very open forum. It was very low key. They really, the advanced questions helped sort of shape the conversation. And so I thought we got a good hearing, and I felt that we had many opportunities to say what we needed to say, lots of time for conversation and lots of feedback, both from the chair and from other legislators about what happened, lots of back and forth among the assembled folks in the roundtable. So I was very grateful for this. I expected it to be a little bit rigid and pro forma and not very satisfying. And then, in fact, I found it very worthwhile and thought we really got a good hearing. So I appreciate the Joint Commission for the way they orchestrated this.
Great. What was your major takeaway from that, Mayor Bennis, out of the curiosity? I mean, just like if you were going to fix the financial downfall, what would have been the major takeaway from that meeting, out of curiosity?
Well, I mean, I think we all walked a very similar pathway, which is that recognizing that as the state makes investments, that we need to be sure that those investments percolate down to the local level, and that that public safety continues to be sort of our abiding concern is how do we do that? And I think, you know, there was no clear conclusion about what that appropriate revenue stream should be. But I think the message was that I think everybody was delivering at the table is that our local jurisdictions would need to feel the benefit of any possible increase in the concerns about how that would play out. So I think they heard that.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Councillor Mo.
Mayor Venice was very nicely saying, we need more money. But everybody needs money, and that's always the universal problem. But that event I was apprehensive too. It was very well done. Everybody was heard. And when they finally got the microphone out, everybody could hear what they said. And everybody was respected. A lot of different things they spoke to, but everybody heard it. So it was a very good event, and I'm very glad I was there. And I'm very glad we did it. And it could be an example maybe for something in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Groves, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just tacking on to what others have said, I also appreciated at the end where the state elected officials basically repeated back what they heard. And so, you know, not only were they actively engaged in the listening process, they basically repeated back what was said, you know, paraphrased, but to me that told me that they heard it. So that's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to also put a plug in to Councillor Groves about your comment a few meetings ago about our emergency corridors getting to the hospital from Eugene was well articulated by Miss Brenda Moore. She did a great job doing that and just like took the thunder out of my sails. I thought that was going to be my deal, but Brenda did a great job. I certainly appreciate it. But I think that was something that really made them think in maybe a different direction. So
I should have mentioned that. I apologize, Brenda. That was well done. And it is important that we figure this out. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. I just happened to be further towards the front of the line than Commissioner Lovell. So I apologize. I took your thunder.
No, I'm just giving you a hard time, Brenda. You did a great job. Appreciate you much. Anyone else got any other comments? Takeaways from that? Brenda, you got a comment? Go ahead.
Yes, I think that some people in the room kind of tiptoed around the subject of funding a little bit, but I think we eventually got to the point of the conversation where we could all agree that there is no single solution and that whatever solution the legislature can come up with is going to need public support, and it's going to be a difficult, heavy lift.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else, the takeaway for me when Rob Zako did the math and was saying that it takes $2,000 for every man, woman, and child in the state of Oregon per year to pull us out of the deficit that we're in right now, that was kind of an eye-opener. So I was looking at my 93-year-old mother-in-law who doesn't drive if she would be willing to pay that every year. So like you said, it's going to be a heavy lift. There's one takeaway that I had too. I don't know if this is, I don't want to throw legislator Lively under the bus, but him and I had a conversation after that, and I asked him, I said, hey, what do you think is going on with that? Because I've known John for a very long time before he was in politics. And he says, well, he said, this looks exactly and sounds exactly like the meeting we had in 2017. And I kind of went, so here we are 7 years later, still talking about the same things with no solutions in mind. And I think that was kind of my poison downer takeaway, if I could put some downer juice onto this discussion, was, as an entrepreneur kind of person, I'm kind of looking for some solutions that we can start putting into practice in a sooner way than 7 years. So I'm hoping just as a body of MPO members, we can, continue to not necessarily put pressure, but at least keep movement moving forward so that at least we can get some of these solutions in track. So that was kind of my takeaway. Any other comments? All right, good deal. Well, let's move on then. This one is another informational item too about our regional transportation plan monthly update. And if this is going to be Kelly Clark's deal, this is you on stage. You go.
Thank you. Yep, this is our standing regional transportation plan project update, and regional transportation plan being RTP. So I don't have a presentation today, but just a brief update on the pieces that we're working on. Primarily our existing conditions analysis, which includes compiling and updating all of our data, including transportation network data, data related to environment, sensitive areas, demographics, population, and economics. We'll be documenting and interpreting these existing conditions and presenting to MPC as they're ready and as they've gone through our technical advisory committee. We're also working on updating our travel and land use models so that we can analyze our baseline and future travel for things like mode share and congestion, vehicle miles traveled, like we talked about in the last agenda item or 2 agenda items prior. We're in the final stages of contracting for our consultants, for 2 different consultants, one to perform our 3rd regional travel barriers and benefits survey, which we've done every RTP update for the last 2 and helps us kind of understand how people in our region are traveling and the experiences that they're experiencing as they're traveling. And that our consultant will help us with public engagement so that we can get out into the community and inform and help understand what an MPO is and what are we here to do. And finally, we're finalizing the methodology that we'll be using to develop the RTP project list in a manner that is transparent. It's informative to the comments, you know, again, being informative and understanding what our role is as an MPO and what that project list represents, and then also meets our performance-based planning and programming requirements. So those are the big pieces right now. They've taken a lot of our time and effort, but we'll be able to report out on a lot of these over the upcoming months. And that's all I have.
All right, super. Any questions for Kelly? Mayor Venice, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a comment because I've been sitting in this long enough that things are starting to make sense to me, I think. And you know, takes a while to track all of this, but I think just coming out of the conversation about the Joint Committee on Transportation and thinking about revenue and thinking about the RTP and the list of projects, and I think I also sit on the Lane Act, and so they were very active in the Joint Committee, and then thinking about you know, our focus, Randy, David, Brenda, you know, talking about seismic standards and connectivity. I mean, what we're really sort of thinking about is, you know, what do we need to actually have the most well-connected and safe system? And maybe as we're thinking about that project list, thinking about, is there a filter there for, instead of looking at a mass of projects and, well, we want to do all of these, do we need to hone in a little bit and say, you know, in the time frame of this RTP and thinking about the CFEC requirements, the climate friendly, thinking about all of these pieces, thinking about the seismic, what are those routes that we might want to prioritize and what are those projects? And that I think makes more sense to the public, and I think also helps sort of reinforce the message at the state level about how we want to direct our funds. So that is way beyond my expertise to figure out how to do that, but I just feel like there's a filter there around not just how we get around within sort of the Eugene Springfield area, but those smaller communities, how they get to us, how we get to them. So, and where the, you know, can we use that filter to sort of prioritize and think through our list a little bit differently, especially going out and saying, what does the MPO do or what does the MPC do? Well, it makes more sense if we're saying we're trying to make sure there's a safe way for you to get from Cresswell or Junction City, you know, to Eugene or to I-5 or whatever.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Councilor Groves, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I had a sticky button there. Building on what the Mayor Venice just said, there was a prior meeting that Councilor Moe and I had with Vidal and ODOT's, I believe he was the chief engineer, at least he was the chief engineer for the seismic study. And we emphasized routes beyond just the 2 cities. We were talking about, you know, how do we get people west of Eugene over to the hospitals, for example, and south and Coburg north. And you can get to the hospitals on surface streets in Springfield, but there's some bridges there that are of concern as well. But again, trying to bring this down to not just going after the bridges in the worst shape, but looking at how can we move people, whether it's evacuations or getting people to hospitals. So I think we are taking that approach. And I don't know if Steve, if you have more to share from your perspective, but that was certainly on both of our minds. Thank you.
Steve,
can you hear me?
ahead. Yep.
That was a real eye-opening experience. They produced some documents, maps. Every bridge in this county will fail, potentially. So we need to establish some very safe corridors as prominence, get those going, get them fixed, so we can feed into them if that event happens. And man, what an experience seeing with that. And that engineer he talked about in Salem, I didn't understand him, but that guy really knew his stuff.
Awesome. All right, anyone else? Well, great input, good comments today. I'm looking for Vidal. He's not on there. Is anyone else there from ODOT that maybe wants to? Oh, Bill, you're there. There you go. Bill, you want to do an ODOT update for us, sir?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do have a few comments. I talked with Vidal before the meeting. By the way, Councilor Moe, the engineer you're referring to from ODOT is named Bert Hartman. He's the state bridge engineer. I'm glad you had a good meeting with him. It is quite interesting, all that goes into evaluating bridges. So the Oregon Transportation Commission is meeting in Florence today. That's why Vidal could not be here. He's there. One of the items on the agenda is the ODOT budget. ODOT is asking the OTC to approve the agency's budget for the 2025-27 biennium. That's 3 years. I'm not sure why they call it a biennium, but
should be a triennium, right, Bill?
Yes, or that's how they label it. In any case, related to this item, I just got an email today. Governor Kotek provided a letter to the OTC affirming her commitment to advocate for the legislature to approve a transportation funding package in 2025. So that's good news. The governor's continuing to express her support for all of that effort that you just discussed a few minutes ago. Let's see. The OTC will also be approving a package of amendments to the 2024-27 Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, the STIP, as you know. This is an annual process. The package of amendments includes all the amendments that the MPC has been reviewing and approving over the last year. So there is something that comes about as a result of all your approvals. Dan Callister's probably explained to you before, the local TIP needs to agree with the state's STIP. And this is how how ODOT incorporates all your amendments into the statewide program. That's all I have, Chair.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate the update. Tell Vidal to enjoy his vacation. I assume he's on vacation.
He will be gone next week. He's traveling to Florida, I understand. He's originally from there, so he must have some family and some things to take care of there.
Awesome. Well, good. Wish him well on that. Awesome. The last thing on our agenda, folks, is our Transportation Improvement Program project changes. Exciting reading. Come on, small print. You love it. Any changes to that or any comments on that anyone's got? Glad to see some of those programs are going through. That's good. We have a good construction season ahead of us. All right. If there's no comments, I've got one last thing for you. I was kind of joggling around in my mind last week, the word enthusiasm, and I got it from a Winston Churchill quote. Enthusiasm, in my mind, was something that's worth the cost of your effort, and worth the effects. But Winston Churchill said it best for all of us leaders. He said, courage is going from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm. So I'll leave you with that and adjourn this meeting of the MPC. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a great day.